Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Keith Fleming. This is the Daily Fix podcast on the Fantasy and Frames Podcast Network, Fantasy and Frames only DFS podcast. I am joined, as always, by my man, my brother from another mother, riding the high of the Giants' victory last week, Joe the Brain Mats. What's going on, Joe?
Oh, don't forget, Keith, I'm also riding the high of the Chicago Bulls win last night.
Oh, screw you, Joe. You had to go there, really? How dare you?
I left my Bulls hat at another house, but otherwise I'd be wearing it right now.
I'm glad you did, because I would have probably had to boycott the show, and that'd have been a shame. Unfortunately, Joe, all good things come to an end. The Roman Empire, and so did our streak of optimal lineup scoring 200 plus points. Not only did we dip below it, we laid an egg last week, like straight up 149 points. Extremely disappointing. I will never, ever, ever doubt DraftKings scoring again, pricing, right? Because we didn't understand Herbert's price. We definitely didn't understand Miles Sanders' price. They knew, because I think Sanders had one carry in the first quarter.
That one was interesting. I mean, Herbert, I believe, still threw for 300 yards. He just threw 2 picks and no touchdowns. So it was like he had success, but he just couldn't capitalize.
It's the Titans, though, man. Come on. Like Carson Wentz,
that's
cut him up. So we're obviously upset
Sanders
about that. We get that, that happens. And I still believe in our reasoning, why we had our picks that we did. But me and Joe are competitive, and we like to give people good picks. So upset about that. The way that I've came back this week is, boy, do I got some stats and information for you boys this week. I went into overdrive. I tried to, tunnel vision and really get as much information as possible for the plays this week. And again, just a reminder, because I know that people's fantasy seasons are ending. Congratulations if you're still playing. I don't have any season-long leagues and I'm still alive. So thank you, Alan Lazard, for your 1.4 points or whatever you got on Monday night, which cost me the one league that I was still in the playoffs. My season, the DFS show, we're going to keep going. We go through the playoffs. We got some good guests coming. We are really excited to be here and to, help you fill the void of when fantasy football season ends. If you haven't done DFS, we'll show you how to do it. It's actually great.
Now's the time.
Yeah. Wild card division is great, man, because there's just enough teams and players to where you don't have to worry about sharing with a bunch of people. But at the same time, it's not overwhelming with how many people you have to choose from. And even the conference championship and obviously the Super Bowl, which is showdown, is fun. And we're going to have a good time either way. But we're going to get back to our winning ways this week. Hopefully another 200-plus optimal lineup from our plays. But if this is your first time listening to us, first of all, welcome. Thanks for being here. Every week, me and Joe give you an expensive, median, and bargain tier play using DraftKings pricing for DFS. Sometimes we'll share picks. Sometimes we don't. Usually there's around 28 to 36 plays. And I felt pretty good about this week. But before we get into it, Joe, I just real quickly want to touch on something we talked about, trying to avoid, especially in the passing game, the Arctic temperatures, including in Atlanta. Not that they're playing a game here, but that just kind of shows how cold it is everywhere. It's going to be 15 degrees on Saturday here. Did you kind of use that as well? Like, especially for the quarterbacks and receivers trying to find guys that are either in a dome or basically in California?
I definitely had a lean towards guys in domes or avoiding the worst weather. Although I will say the main thing you really want to look up is wind.
Yeah.
Wind is always number one. I think it's the Cleveland game where they're saying it could be 40-mile-an-hour winds.
And with the way Watson's look, can you imagine how much worse he's going to look?
So, yeah, to me, you're looking at Saints Browns. Don't expect anything in the passing game there. You should be going all in on the run games. I guess Taysom Hill actually becomes kind of a more interesting guy.
So you're saying big week for Nick Chubb?
Well. It could absolutely be a big week for Nick Chubb.
My boy Chubb.
But yeah, that was the one game where I was like, all right, I'm 100% out on the passing. Sadly, Bills Bears, because we would have loved to load it up on a lot of the Bills guys in that game. That one sounds like it's going to be pretty rough too. So that's kind of the other game. The other game that I would have also been out on would have been Jags Jets, but that's tonight. That's happening right now. So,
and that would have been a wise decision because it's been kind of a shit show so far. So let's get into the QBs right off the bat. My expensive tier play is Justin Fields, 7,500 versus Buffalo. We just talked about it. I'll get into the reason why I'm not worried about it with Justin Fields. I will tell you, though, for the record, I still like Allen at 8,400 as well. He's had 7 games this year versus defenses ranked 24th or worse on DK. He scored 30 or more in 6 of 7 and 20 points in the other. Allen, like Fields, also runs a lot, when there's bad weather, which, they're probably the 2 guys in the league with Lamar that could score 20 points just on rushing like it's nothing. But Fields is my official play. Not only because he's Justin Fields and he's been incredible, but because he's $900 cheaper than Allen. And you don't have to worry about stacking him to where, I feel like if you play Allen, you have to stack him with the receiver. That normally is Diggs. And then you've already taken up a huge portion of your salary. But my boy Fields, man, he has been just amazing. He's now scored 21 points or more in 7 straight, thrown multiple touchdowns in 4 of his last 6 games. This is what's just ridiculous, Joe. He's rushed for 80 yards or more in 6 of his last 8, 70 or more in 5 straight. So that's just 7, 8 free points every week. Since week 6, 8 starts, Fields is averaging almost 29 points a game, 28.42. Only Jalen Hurts is averaging more points over his last 8 starts. But Hurts is not going to play, and he's $800 more even if he did. Buffalo has allowed quarterbacks to run. Mahomes and Jacoby Brissett both rushed for 20 yards or more versus the Buffalo D. And then Lamar had 70 yards on the ground. Meaning, again, QBs can run on this. The Bills have given up multiple passing touchdowns all of a sudden in 5 of their last 9. And Fields, this is what I really like about it. Versus really good defenses. He scored 23.58 points or more versus New England, Philadelphia, and Dallas. It doesn't get much harder than that and kind of shows he's matchup proof. And then finally, as I kind of alluded to at the beginning of this, much like Hurts in his first full season as a starter, you don't need to stack Fields. You don't have to worry about it. It's why I think at this price, he's a great play. He's got a high floor because of the rushing. Again, 70 or 80 yards rushing in his last 8 games. And we know how high his ceiling can be because he's had 2 40-point games and 2 of his last 5. And again, in those games, he didn't really throw the ball. So even if it is windy and nasty, it doesn't matter because he had 170 yards on the ground and multiple rushing touchdowns. But I really do like Fields at that 7,500 price. He's my expensive tier QB this week.
I will definitely never argue, at least not the rest of this season, against Justin Fields, especially at an under $8,000 price. And yeah, he's one of those guys where if you want a quarterback that you could bank on in that weather, it would be Justin Fields. The cannon arm, the running. Obviously, Josh Allen and him, this is kind of like the ideal combination of guys to go at it in that game, in that weather. I'm playing it as safe as you can play it. I'm going Patrick Mahomes, 8,400 against Seattle. Seattle has been worse against the run this season than the past. Obviously, Tariq Woolen's played really well for them. But looking through their last 8 games, they've given up multiple passing scores in 5 of those 8. The 3 times they didn't were against Daniel Jones, John Wolford, and Sam Darnold. So Patrick Mahomes, slightly different caliber of quarterback.
Slightly. As
evidenced by the fact that if we go through Patrick Mahomes' games since week, I believe it is 6, 8 of 9 games, he's hit that 300 yards that gets us the 3-point bonus. 8 of 9.
Hello.
5 of those games, he's given us 30-plus total points. For all the talk that people were like, oh, is the injury going to cost? Shoot. I just do this every week. I blank. Yeah.
Hurts,
obviously. The guy who just destroyed my Giants 2 weeks ago. Jalen Hurts, who was fantastic, but everyone's like, oh, well, the injury cost him the MVP. My answer would be no, because right now Patrick Mahomes is the MVP.
Completely agree.
Because he is playing at that level. He is awesome. Listen, if you watch the Houston game, you're like, wow, why is Kansas City struggling with Houston? It wasn't because of Patrick Mahomes. who went 36 of 41. He's the man. And also, as we'll see throughout the rest of this pod, I think Seattle is actually very poorly designed with the way that they've played defense this year to stop Patrick Mahomes in this Kansas City offense. So I'm not fazed at all by Tariq Woolen or anything else.
In their defense, I don't know if any defense is really greatly designed to stop.
Oh, but I would say especially poorly designed, I guess.
Right. I got you. No, I got you. Yeah. All right. The median tier, which I do like the median plays this week.
There are some good ones. This is the opposite of last week when you didn't even.
Right. I punted instead of taking Trevor Lawrence. Great call, Keith. Daniel Jones, 5,600, Minnesota. He's slightly over Geno, who is your median play, who I also really like. Really, it's because he's $200 cheaper, and you're going to hear this over and over and over again with my plays. He's playing indoors, which is a big deal too. He's not going to be dealing with that cold weather.
That's nice.
Jones has scored 18 points or more in 5 of his last 7 starts, has 5 or more points in rushing 3 of his last 5. Playing in a dome versus a very bad defense versus QBs. The Vikings are 28th on DK and points allowed to the quarterback position. Since week 10, 5 of the 6 QBs have scored 20 points or more versus this D. 4 of 6 of those QBs have finished top 6 in DK scoring at the position. They've allowed multiple passing touchdowns in 6 of their last 8. And, man, they've struggled with running quarterbacks, which Daniel Jones doesn't get the credit that these other guys we always talk about does. But Daniel Jones is a good running quarterback. Fields had 47 yards on the ground. Kyler Murray had 36. Jalen Hurts, 57. And Josh Allen had 84. So Daniel Jones is going to have plenty of opportunities to run. And then what I really like is Jones has had good games against other defenses ranked in this range, that bottom of DK ranking versus QBs. He scored 18 points versus Tennessee, 21.6 versus Chicago, and 29.6 versus Detroit. And earmuffs, Joe, I am worried that the Giants are going to be down in this game, meaning they're going to be throwing. But I actually think that may be their best chance to win this game because Minnesota's secondary is so bad. I mean, it's so bad. I really like Daniel Jones this week at 5,600 because I think his floor is in that 18-point range, which he scored versus Tennessee. And again, he had 21 and 29 against 2 other really bad secondaries.
Yeah, as we'll see as we go along in this pod with some of my other picks, I 100% agree with everything you said, both good and bad for my Giants just now. So I am a fan of that play. I would also say if you want to go Kirk Cousins at 6,300, I would not fight anyone for that. But to your point about why you went with Jones over Geno, he's cheaper. That's much the same thought process I have with Geno versus Kirk Cousins. It's $500 cheaper, and $500 is something I can upgrade somewhere else significantly, potentially.
And I think it's 1,000% Geno's down to where it's not 1,000% that Cousins is down, right?
Yeah, I think that there is a risk in the Giants game that even though he's not one of my picks, this could be the Dalvin Cook game.
Ooh.
Now, I think it's more likely to be some other guys that we'll talk about. But based on the way the Giants' run defense has gone, I mean, even last week, I think, when Washington ran the ball with their running backs instead of Curtis Samuel, they were averaging like 6 yards a carry. So
Cook was incredible in that Indy game, too. He was incredible in the Indy game.
If he doesn't take a screen pass for 66 yards or whatever for a touchdown, they don't have the greatest comeback of all time.
That's right.
But anyway, to my actual pick, which is Geno Smith. This one's actually, I mean, it's real simple. Like you just said, I think we feel pretty confident that Kansas City is going to put up a lot of points in this game. And then to that nature with Geno, he's been a guy, I think I've picked him like 4 out of 6 weeks.
He's friend of the pod at this point, Joe, for sure.
He is. Now, I went off of him last week because he was playing the San Francisco 49ers, the best defense in football, and it broke his streak of 7 straight games with multiple passing scores. He only had 1. And also, he going into that game, 5 straight games over 250 yards passing. He ended up 238. Still a reasonable game against a great defense. Mm-hmm. But this is the get-right game because, again, like I said, prior to playing the best defense in football, 7 straight multiple passing scores. Kansas City on the year has 2 games where they have not given up 2 or more passing touchdowns. Quarterbacks in those games were Malik Willis, making his first ever start in the NFL, in which he threw 16 passes and completed 5 of them. And the guy I'm apparently picking on, which is John Wolford, so who threw 23 passes and completed 13 of them. So basically, if you are a competent NFL quarterback, or even semi-competent like Davis Mills, who threw 2 touchdowns last week, you can get 2 passing touchdowns against Kansas City. Geno Smith has played at roughly a top 10 level among quarterbacks this year.
I think he's definitely been top 10 for sure. He's been great.
So, yeah, again, in a game where I think Mahomes and company light Seattle up, Geno's going to have to throw a lot. Even without Tyler Lockett, I expect him to have success in this game, and that's why he's been median tier play.
And we'll get more into that when we get to the receivers, because I know you got one. I've got a different one. Bargains here. We share them, right?
We do indeed.
It's Minshew Mania, Joe. 4,800 versus the Cowboys. A reminder, he made 2 starts for the Eagles last year. He scored 15.7 points or more in both. This is what was impressive to me. Looking back, he scored 15 or more points in 9 of his last 11 starts dating back to 2020. So he consistently puts up points for fantasy. Included, he had 2 passing touchdowns versus the Cowboys in the regular season finale last year. A reminder, no Miles Sanders. I think Devontae Smith played a quarter. So they were playing backups. He still threw 2 touchdowns, still scored 15.
Definitely no A.J. Brown.
Definitely no A.J. Brown. No Goddard that week. They set him. The Cowboys passing D is not in great form. They've allowed 2 or more touchdowns for their last 7 games, including a 4-touchdown performance by Trevor Lawrence in the Jaguars' comeback win. The Eagles will also have the full complement of their receivers for the first time since Dallas Goedert went on IR. We know how great A.J. Brown's been all year. Devontae Smith has been incredible the last 6 weeks, really quietly. People aren't really talking about him. I know we'll talk about him today. And then you get Goddard coming back, which is big. Goddard had his best game fantasy-wise of his career in the only start he's had with Gardner Minshew. Last year, week 13, had over 100 yards, 2 touchdowns. Finally, I think the Eagles are going to be more pass-heavy, obviously, with Minshew than Hurts, meaning more opportunities for Brown, Smith, Goddard, the entire passing game. And don't underestimate the Minshew playing the game for Mike Leach. I don't know if you saw, his speech at his funeral. Very touching. He really cares about Leach. Leach was the one who gave him an opportunity. It's why he's in the NFL now. And Gardner is that dude, man. He really is. He's a gamer. And, normally I would say that's pressure, having a situation where you're going out and trying to, play in honor of somebody's memory. But I think that's just going to motivate Gardner. And it's even more likely that he goes off. And again, this Cowboys D is not the Cowboys D that it was early in the season. And best of all, in a dome.
Yeah, and to your point about that Cowboys D not being the same as it was earlier in the season, there's second and third corners, Jordan Lewis and Anthony Brown, are on IR. So that would be one of the big reasons why this defense is not playing at the same level. I know they have a rookie corner who's playing the slot right now, Deron Bland, who's played pretty well so far, but he's still a 5th-round rookie. So if he ends up having to cover A.J. Brown or Devonta Smith, I would bet on them. And then Nashawn Wright has played only 19 snaps this year so far, who's, at least according to PFF, would be the other starter on the outside. Those 19 snaps, his coverage grade is a 38, so those 19 snaps have not gone well. Last year, his season grade was a 46, and that was his first year in the NFL. So, yeah, basically, if they're not matched up against Diggs, huge advantage to the Eagles wide receivers. And like you said, Gardner Minshew, I think I read somewhere that for his career, and this isn't on a
Minshew Mania.
DK. This wasn't DK, I don't believe. It was just normal fantasy scoring, so he didn't get 300-yard bonuses or anything. But his career average is over 17 points per game in fantasy. So he has been, a very reasonable player. And, for all the difficulties that this Dallas defense can still pose with that pass rush and everything, the Eagles have the best supporting cast, I think, in the NFL. I mean, this is probably the best offensive line in the NFL.
Oh, I think it definitely
AJ Brown, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert. You can't really ask for more. So the fact that he's at 4,800,
it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I think he's the obvious play for the low tier.
The running backs. And I know you're going to say, well, no doy, Keith. I got 2 of these plays this week. But I'm going with Derrick Henry for my expensive tier running back. He's 8,600. There's no need to get into all the reasons I love Henry this week. So instead, I just want to give you his numbers the last 4 times he's played the Texans. 211 yards rushing, 3 touchdowns. 212 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns. 250 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns. And earlier this year, 219 yards, 2 touchdowns. Ladies and gentlemen, that is 892 yards and 9 touchdowns in their last 4 games. What have we said about the great Texans run defense? They are now up to 8 running backs have scored 30 points against them. Thank you very much, Jerick McKinnon. And again, Joe made the great point that I wasn't even aware of until we talked earlier today. Tannehill's out. Willis has like 170 yards combined rushing and passing in his 2 starts. I think we're going to see a lot of Derrick Henry. It's going to be one of those that everybody has him. I don't care. I can't turn it down. I actually think he's too cheap. 8,600 to this matchup. Like we just saw what he did to the Chargers last week in a game they trailed most of the time. I think Henry is a must start, and you try to go cheaper in other positions, which I'll give you a bunch of those ways you can do that here as we go through this podcast.
Yeah, no disrespect to Christian McCaffrey, who is obviously
it's ridiculous,
extremely good and has scored 28 or more points in 3 straight games. There's no way I would pick him over Derrick Henry. Like you said, it's 4 straight games with at least 2 touchdowns and 200 yards in this matchup.
It's ridiculous.
I would imagine, I haven't seen anyone say this, but I would assume based on those numbers, it's the greatest 4-game stretch in NFL history.
I couldn't do that on Madden,
one
Joe.
running back versus one team. Yeah. Like, unless it was like the old school Madden where like they didn't slow down at all when you hit spin move.
Oh, I did like that.
That was great.
Yeah.
So unless it was that version, the more modern versions that like account for physics, would definitely not allow you to do that. And to the Malik Willis point, obviously, probably the one concern you would have is, hey, they're just going to load up against the run. They're going to force Malik Willis to beat them.
Good luck.
I mean, that's what Kansas City tried to do in the one game Malik Willis started.
And Derrick Henry ran all over him.
Only had 17 carries because they actually did force them on enough 3 and outs. But on those 17 carries, 115 yards and 2 touchdowns.
And the Chiefs are much better run D than the Texans.
Yeah, not even a great run D, but better than the Texans.
Much better.
And so there's no reason to go away from this. The only reason to go away from it, honestly, is just it's going to be very heavily played. So if you're trying to win the million, maybe you want to try to differentiate yourself somewhere else. But if you're in any smaller pool,
thank you for bringing
lock Derrick Henry in, lock him in. Don't second guess. Don't lose to your buddies because you thought you were smarter than Derrick Henry crushes Houston every single week that he plays.
I do think though, in the big ones, if it's not a single entry, you should have him at least one. Because I do think that he's going to score enough that you just got to hit the ones around him. Because I'm telling you, again, 8 running backs have scored 30 points or more versus his defense, including Henry earlier this year. I don't see any way he doesn't. I really don't.
Right. We're talking about, again, those last 4 games that he's played against them. These are like borderline or over 40-point weeks. Like this year's one was 38.8. Like you don't get a lot of those throughout a season.
And again, Jerick McKinnon torched him. No offense to Jerick McKinnon. He is not Derrick Henry. We're in it. Median tier, J.K. Dobbins. And I owe him an apology because I said that he was done and he looked washed. And ever since I've said that, he looks like one of the best running backs in football. He's 5,800 and he's facing my sorry ass Atlanta Falcons. Since returning from IR, Dobbins has rushed for 120 yards or more in both games, scored 16.8 points or more in both of those games. This is ridiculous. He's averaging almost 9 yards per carry over those 2 weeks. Wow. That was it. Remember the Dobbins we talked about that we fell in love with, Joe, a couple of years ago, his rookie season down the stretch, where it looked like this guy is going to be
big believers,
unstoppable with Lamar. And again, he's facing a Falcons D that in their last 5 games has allowed, it's painful to say, 856 yards on the ground, 5 touchdowns, over 4 yards per carry, almost 4.5. I think the Ravens, it is leaning toward Lamar playing, correct?
Oh, I'm not 100% on that, but I'm gonna look
so
that up.
From what I've heard, what I heard yesterday on a couple of pods I listened to was this is the date that they've had circled, basically from the injury. It's him returning. Obviously, we'll see. I actually think there's a chance that it's going to help Dobbins if he does not play.
No, it says he's to miss his 3rd straight game.
Okay, so actually that makes me feel even better about it because they are going to now lean heavily on the run. Huntley is not, I don't think, the threat in the red zone that obviously Lamar is. And just to let people know, there was a true split that first week he came back with him and Edwards 2 weeks ago versus Pittsburgh. I think Dobbins had like 15 carries. Edwards had 13. Last week, Baltimore figured it out. 13 carries to Edwards, 7. I have a feeling that is going to be more of the split this week. And again, the Falcons' run defense is not good. We can't pressure the quarterback. I mean, our defense is bad. And hopefully we're at a point we're going to lose the rest of our games. Anyway, I think Dobbins at 5,800 versus this D. Again, in another game, it's going to be freezing cold. For a team that plays in a dome, they typically, those defenses typically don't play well if they play in a dome and they go, from a warm area, they go to a cold game. I really like Dobbins at 5,800. I think he's underpriced with what he's done the 2 weeks since he's been back.
Yeah, I'm glad you picked him in part, Keith, because it allowed me to finally
not pick on my Falcons.
Yeah, thanks, playing Joe. Against your Falcons.
But you did make that Bulls comment.
Because if you hadn't picked Dobbins, I think I might have had to throw him in somewhere in my lineups because I mean we'll throw him in my actual lineups, but in my picks, because I am also a big fan of that matchup. For my median tier, though, I'm going to go with the guy who is not Derrick Henry, but is still very good, and that is Jerick McKinnon.
Really good.
I don't know if he wasn't in your lineups or wasn't the guy who cost you money because someone else had them in their lineups. You might not realize he has 69.6 points on DK the last 2 weeks, and very evenly split, 35.4 and 34.2. He has been absolutely killing it. Naturally, the one fantasy team I picked him up on was the team that finished like 6 and 8. And so he's been killing it for me in my consolation
in the consolation bracket. Don't you love that?
Yeah, I somehow have a team with Justin Jefferson, Saquon Barkley, and Jerick McKinnon now, and it's in the consolation bracket. So that's awesome. But the thing we like about this matchup is, Jerick McKinnon has been killing it. His 17 receptions for 182 yards and 3 touchdowns last 2 weeks. Can he keep scoring that much through the air? Probably not. Definitely not consistently, because he'd have the greatest running back receiving season of all time. But against Seattle, it's actually not that bad of a bet. This team is giving up 43 yards through the air to running backs. That is 26th in the NFL. And if we go by total yardage allowed to running backs, only the Texans are worse. The Texans give up 174, which again, take Derrick Henry. Seattle is giving up 165 yards per game to opposing backfields. Now that does spell the potential comeback of the guy that we've been riding recently, which is Isaiah Pacheco. But I will say he's had, he lost a fumble last week. McKinnon's kind of become the bigger touchdown scorer thus far. So even an extra $200.
McKinnon's thrived in this offense before too. This is not the first year that he's done.
Yeah. I mean, if people remember the whole, this is a guy who I believe in the Super Bowl run wasn't.
Yeah, it was.
Leading the backfield.
Yep.
So he's a good player. And again, I think, you look at Seattle, this is a team that they actually have a very legitimate cornerback. They haven't been terrible against wide receivers. great. Jerick McKinnon can take one to the house, as he's proven the last 2 weeks. So to me, I mean, you're getting a guy who scored 69 points over the last 2 weeks, and both of them over 30, and he's still under 6,000 in a matchup against a bottom 5 to 6 team when it comes to covering running backs through the air. And yeah, again, Pacheco lost the fumble last week. McKinnon had 10 carries, and he took those for 52
The game-winning touchdown run too.
So yeah, I assume they will give Pacheco another chance, but he's on very thin ice. If he were to lose another fumble, this would become the full-on McKinnon show throughout the rest of the game. And it doesn't even have to do that for him to have a big game, as he proved against Denver. Which, again, Denver is an elite defense.
Right.
Last week it was against Houston, who, as we've mentioned 5 times in the last 10 minutes, is trash. But yeah, the only defense that's within 10 yards of what Houston allows to running backs is Seattle. So don't go away from it.
I love that play. And I said it last year. I didn't understand why the Chiefs went away from him. I felt like that their team was most dangerous with him because he's like the perfect back for their offense, because he's such a threat in the passing and the run game. Pacheco, they're going to run it when he's in there.
I love how they drafted a running back in the first round
again
who did a pale imitation of Jerick McKinnon when they could have just kept giving the ball to Jerick McKinnon, but whatever.
I don't even know if you could say he's doing an imitation. He's
not doing anything anymore.
All right, my bargain tier. We're both going Buffalo Bills. I went with the cheaper one. We flipped a coin. James Cook, 4,800 at Chicago. The Bears' run defense is trash. Cook has scored double figures in 2 of his last 3, despite only seeing 12 touches over his last 2 games, which is a little worrisome. I'm not going to lie, because he saw 24 the previous 2. And then he's only seen 12, right when we thought he was getting ramped up. But the last 2 weeks, the games have been highly competitive. 1-score games. But in the last 4 games, if the Bills win by 10 or more, and just to let you know, I do think they're going to win by 10 or more this week versus the Bears. Cook is averaging 10 touches a game. He's averaging over 10 points per game on DK. I think the Bills win this game easy, which should lead to Cook seeing around that 10-touch total. He's facing, again, a Bears defense. I don't know if they still are. Last week, I know they were dead last in rushing yards allowed. They're one of the top run defenses in giving up explosive runs, which I've talked about every time I bring up James Cook on this podcast. He is top 5 in the league for his percentage of breakaway runs. And I just think that the Bills are real close, I think, to kind of shutting Singletary down. If they can wrap something up, they are not going to risk their feature back getting injured. That could be this week. I really do. If they get up big, I do not see Singletary. Like, say they're up 17 points at the half, which that could easily happen. I could see Singletary not getting any touches. And Cook ended up being very heavily involved with Nyheim Hines. That's why I think he's more of a flyer. Joe's going to talk about Singletary, which is a much safer pick. But if you're trying to save money and you're looking for one of those plays in that big, tournament's going to be in a boom play, I think James Cook versus defense could be that.
Yeah. I definitely can see, the whole blowout potential that you're talking about. Although I do think the weather clearly plays to Chicago's advantage.
Yeah.
Because there's a pretty vast gap in the passing efficiency of these offenses. Just a little bit. And we saw
the pass blocking.
100% there as well. And we saw Chicago come through against, obviously it was a different, thing going on with Trey Lance making his first start and everything in that week 1, the Mud Bowl.
They've been really competitive, though. A lot of good teams. Like the Bears have been impressed with the way they've hung in with teams.
So I wouldn't rule them out because of that weather. I wouldn't rule them out staying in this game. But even if it turns into a blowout, just because I think it's going to be so hard to pass, now, there's always the potential Josh Allen just runs it in 3 times. And hey, it should have been Josh Allen.
Or with the way he throws it through the wind. He's one of the few guys that can do that.
One of the 5 quarterbacks where I'm not 100% out on him throwing the ball in 20-mile-an-hour gusts. But yeah, I think both running backs probably see decent play in this game. Singletary, he's seen at least 13 carries in 5 of the last 6 games. He scored 4 touchdowns in that time. So he has that lead back role right now. And, as you mentioned, Chicago's defense, granted, it's a spirited effort against the Eagles. They only gave up 47 yards on 14
their
carries.
Defense, so they fucking run the ball.
Right. And then Philadelphia was also outside of I believe Jalen Hurts threw 2 picks, but otherwise, I think like every other pass was A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith wide open 20 yards downfield. So there wasn't a heavy emphasis on trying to run the ball.
Right.
Prior to that, they'd had 3 straight games, at least 110 yards, at least 4.5 yards per carry. On the season, 109 yards, 4.7 yards per carry on the ground allowed. So, yeah, I just think this is a game that leans more towards Buffalo running it. This is one of the most pass-happy teams going back to the Dayball years once Josh Allen became a good quarterback. But this is kind of the game where I could see them being even or even leaning towards the run on average because of that weather potentially. And that means a great opportunity for Singletary and Cook. Yeah, and on the other side too, if they're able to pass, that still just improves the odds that either guy scores a touchdown because this offense, if they can pass, this offense is going to score 30 plus in Chicago easily.
Well, don't you think with the wind too, throwing, it's more likely to go to the backs with the wind?
Yeah, because you want to lean more towards the near passes, which Singletary is coming off of a 3-reception game against Miami. So yeah, I think these guys in this matchup, it could go well for them in either scenario, where the total blowout is towards them because they're more likely to score. It's especially, I think more towards Cook. But if they have to pound the ball, 25, 30 times, then I expect both these guys to potentially see 10 plus carries. And at this price range, you're also not risking a lot. So I think, when you look at the backs in this grouping of the 5,500 and below, I have bigger question marks about pretty much everyone else because I look at like Deontay Foreman or Chuba Hubbard for Carolina.
What a mess.
Well, what if Detroit, what if their offense just sucks again like it did last week where they were averaging like 1.5 yards per carry and Detroit, it's beating them by 17 at halftime. Well, then those guys aren't doing anything. Yep. So for me, this Buffalo, this combination, any way I twist this game in my mind, I see opportunity for them.
I like that. And also, I just think Buffalo wants to establish their run going into the playoffs. This is as good of an opportunity as you're going to have. Like, sometimes you just need to get right, beat up on a team with something like that. And I think this is a great chance for them to do that. Moving on to the wide receivers, who I really do like some of them this week. I'm starting with my boy, A.J. Brown, 8,100 at Detroit. He's seen 32 targets over his last 3 games. Yes, I realize that was not with Gardner Minshew, but again, I think they're actually going to throw more with Gardner than they would with Hurts. He scored 30 or more points in 2 of his last 3, 4 touchdowns over his last 4 games, all kinds of good stuff. There is a narrative that Minshew is not a good down the field passer. That is just flat out false. In 2019, PFF, who we all love their stats and information, they had him as the 3rd best deep field passer in the NFL that year. Last season, in his 2 starts with the Eagles, he was 3 of 6 on passes that traveled 20 or more air yards, 89 yards, a touchdown, no interceptions, QB rating of 135.4. And oh, by the way, one of those was that meaningless game in Week 18 where the immortal J.J. Whiteside dropped a 30-yard touchdown pass in the end zone. So obviously his numbers would be even better on air yards without that. The Cowboys D all of a sudden just gives up big plays. Just in their last 4 games, they've given up passing plays of 59, 45, 44, 36, 30, 28, and 27. And a reminder that, yes, Lawrence was responsible for the 59 and 28-yard pass. The rest of those passes came from Daniel Jones, Davis Mills, and Matt Ryan. So, no offense to those guys. Maybe Jones would be the one guy I'd say that has, similar arms to Gardner, but Davis Mills and Matt Ryan, Mills is really inaccurate. Ryan can't throw the ball down the field. So you can throw it down there on them. And finally, I loved, again, this game is indoors. I'm trying to find players that don't have to worry about the cold, don't have to worry about the wind. And sometimes you get hunches, right, Joe? I have a hunch the Eagles are going to just win this game. I really do. And I'm going to save exactly why to the very end because I don't want to piss off a bunch of Cowboys fans this early in a podcast.
I think you already did, but
no, if they'll stay to the end, I'll really piss them off because I'm gonna compare them to another team that they're not gonna like. But AJ Brown, 8,100. Again, I think Gardner is a better option than Hurts in this game because you don't have to worry about Gardner running for 100 yards. We'll see what Sanders can do without Hurts, but I think so much of Sanders' success and the Eagles' run success has been the fact that you got to worry about Hurts running as well. I like AJ Brown. I like Devontae Smith. I like Dallas Goedert. I think the passing game is going to do very well for Philadelphia this week. But AJ Brown, 8,100 is my expensive tier wide receiver.
I will say I am with you on, probably not too surprisingly, since I also was in on Gardner Minshew. I mean, I'm with you that my leaning is that the Eagles win. Granted, I am biased because I hate the Cowboys more than anyone else. And I also really want I really want Philadelphia to lock up that 1 seed. So they're playing
the Giants,
week 18 against the Giants. Granted, hopefully the Giants won't need that win anymore after last week. But hey, I'll take all the insurance I can
Minnesota, they won't have to worry about it.
Yeah, well, we'll see about that one. My high tier, probably not a shock because, hey, Geno Smith was one of my QBs. It's DK Metcalf, 7,100 against Kansas City. Probably, the biggest issue for DK this year has kind of been Lockett has overall been.
I thought you were going to say getting fined for destroying guys on blocks.
That too, which
what a great presser, man. He said basically that the refs in the NFL get salty because he likes to whoop ass, basically, is what he said. And he's like, I'm not going to change my game.
Hey, I'm for it, man.
I am too.
Give us all the wide receivers who actually want to throw blocks that we can get. That's awesome. I love it. I mean, he's an effort guy. If we all remember the chase down that he had as well a couple years ago. But even amidst the Tyler Lockett kind of being maybe the 1A to Metcalf's 1B this year, it shouldn't be lost on people. He has 7 straight games on DK in double digits.
He's been really good.
3 of the last 4 were over 18. One of them was a 29-point game against the Rams. So he is still very good. And Tyler Lockett is out. And again, they're playing Kansas City. So it's not like, oh, Tyler Lockett's out. We can just run the ball all day. It'll be fine. It's no, DK is going to get fed the ball. And yeah, this is a guy who, again, 5 straight games, 8 or more targets. He had the Vegas game, he had 15 targets. I would not be surprised if he's hitting that 15 range again. Because
Lockett averages 7.7 targets per game that they're missing.
And I would expect like half of those to go to DK.
At least.
So, again, if we're talking a guy who's hit at least 8, 5 straight weeks, now we're talking 12, 13 targets. And I really like it against Kansas City as well. As mentioned with the Geno pick, they give up a ton of passing touchdowns. 19 of those have gone to wide receivers. That is dead last in the NFL. No one has given up 19 besides Kansas City. And per Football Outsiders, number 1 wide receivers against Kansas City, which again, he is the clear number 1 now. Lock it out. Only Detroit and Minnesota give up more yards to number 1 wide receivers. 84 yards Kansas City gives up, over 10 yards per target. And DVOA, which kind of combines everything, it's adding in touchdowns, it's talking about the yards per target, dead last Kansas City. So if you want to just throw a bet, take the
over.
DK scores a touchdown. Just take that, because it's gonna be positive money, and he's gonna do it. So lock in DK 7,100. Granted, this is now like my all-in game, so like buyer beware.
Be careful.
Sometimes that game does not always go the way that I thought, but I have faith in.
In fairness, you've had some good ones that way too, though.
And defense. Yes.
Yeah, I got a lot of plays still coming from this game. I think I have 3 more, so I'm with you. My median, my man Terry F1, Scary McLaurin, 6,200 at San Francisco. Another player not dealing with the cold, not dealing with the wind. It's going to be 60 degrees in San Francisco when they kick off. The Niners are rolling right now. This is no disrespect to their defense. They're incredible. I expect them to win this game. It's just ridiculous that they have a 7th-round quarterback who's their 3rd quarterback this year, and this team is just getting better because, talent-wise, you talked about the Eagles. Niners might be the one team that I'd argue maybe is more talented than the Eagles, like top to bottom, outside of QB. But this is all good news for McLaurin. He's caught 4 more passes in 8 straight games. He scored double figures in 6 of 8, so he's doing a lot of good things. He's had 50 or more receiving yards in 7 of 8. And again, the Niners D is playing great, but for fantasy purposes, that's what we're here for, receivers can do damage, particularly in the sense that they have a high floor because they give up a lot of receptions to wide receivers. In just the last 5 games, Arizona, both Dortch and Hopkins, 9 catches each, 23 receptions to receivers. Tyreek Hill had 9 receptions, 146 yards versus team, again in a blowout. Tampa Bay, Godwin and Evans, both 5 receptions each, 17 receptions to wide receivers. Seattle, Lockett and Metcalf, both 7 receptions each, 17 receptions to wide receivers. So I just think that if the game goes the way I think it's going to, McLaurin is without a doubt the favorite target, in the Washington passing game. And there's a chance Wentz gets in this game. I don't think that's a bad thing for McLaurin because he actually can stretch the field, more than Heineke can. So either way, I think it's good for him. I think McLaurin has a game where in the first half, it's not that great. And I think it's going to be one of those deals where he'll have 70, 80 yards and maybe a touchdown in the second half. And next thing you know, he's got the 100-yard bonus, a touchdown, 6, 7 receptions. It's going to be in that 20-point range. I really like him in this game that I think the Washington's really going to struggle with the Niners.
Yeah, I like that play because, I think, a lot of people will just get scared off because it's the Niners. So that kind of gives you that little extra opportunity of having a play that could go off that not a lot of people are likely to be in on. For my mid-tier, I'm going down DJ Moore, 5,500, coming fresh off, finally breaking the 4-touchdown plateau. He had scored 4 touchdowns in 3 straight seasons, despite getting like 1,100 yards every year. Finally got number 5 in the year where he's been surrounded by the most incompetence. So funny how that works. He's an interesting one because Sam Darnold has yet to actually hit 25 attempts in any of his 3 starts. In one of those starts, that led to disaster for DJ Moore against Seattle. He caught 0 passes on 3 attempts.
I was so pissed.
Or 3 targets.
Yep.
The other 2 games, though, 4 receptions, 103 yards, touchdown, 5 receptions, 73 yards, touchdown. So that gave us 23 and 18 points. Those are his second and I believe 4th best games of the season. So 2 out of 3 have been good. And then, he's playing the Detroit Lions, who the eagle-eared, I don't know if that's a phrase, but I assume Eagles can hear well. Eagle-eared listeners may have noted when I talked about number 1 receivers, Detroit, dead last, according to Football Outsiders, 96 yards per game allowed to opposing number 1 wideouts. And if there is anyone who is a clear number 1 in any offense, it is DJ Moore, he gets 45% of the air yards in this offense.
Oh my God.
45%.
That's ridiculous.
Unsurprisingly, that is number 1 in the NFL. So if anyone will go off in this game for Carolina, it will be DJ Moore. And against this Detroit offense or Detroit defense, that opportunity is very much there.
Especially when they're all of a sudden pretty good against the run the last month. And that's why, to your point, I didn't like Foreman or Hubbard is they've really kind of got that down.
Yeah. And as I learned with my Zonovan Knight play last week, that
which I mean, I like that play too.
Run now.
Lions are doing a good job. It's. I hope they make the playoffs. It's a great story, and I keep telling people, Niners and Vikings better be careful because I think if either one of those, if they make that team, I think they could beat either one of those teams. I really do.
I might bet the Lions if they get the Vikings. I'm hoping the Giants will rematch against the Vikings with our DBs back. That would be helpful in the playoffs, but we'll see.
All right, my bargain tier, and I love this play. You went into a lot of the reasons about DK Metcalf, which, again, completely cosign. He's DK Metcalf versus the Chiefs. Marquise Goodwin. Now, again, make sure he's playing. He's questionable. It looks like he will. He's 4,300. The Chiefs have allowed 6 receivers, and this will actually help your Metcalf case before I get into the good one. 6 receivers have finished top 5 on DK this season versus the Chiefs. 7 have finished top 7. 6 receivers have scored 30-plus points versus this defense. But what I like about Goodwin this week is Lockett missing is how many weeks the Chiefs have allowed multiple receivers on DK to score 13 points or more. 7 times they've allowed 2 different receivers from the same team to hit that number. So obviously I think Metcalf's going to have the bigger game, but at this price, I think Goodwin can easily get that 13-point total. He's also a big play guy. In his last 7 games, Goodwin has scored 7 points or more in 5 of 7, including 2 20-point games, which obviously that's what we would really love at this price. He's seen 5 targets or more in 4 of those games. Again, with Lockett being out, that's 7.7 targets per game. That I think I agree with you. Most of them are going to Metcalf, but if he's averaging 5 targets, over those, he could get 6, 7, 8. And then this is the big thing. And I mean, this is the kind of stuff that this is what happens when you have a lay an egg. As I went deep for the information. So we know the Chiefs play predominantly man defense, man-to-man. Goodwin versus man this year. This is pretty phenomenal. He is 3rd at wide receiver in route win rate versus man at 60%. 1st at the position in win rate versus man overall at 56.3%. And 1st at the position in fantasy points per target, first man-to-man defense. I think that they're going to be down. And I think this guy has had several big plays this year. He's one of those guys that can take any play and turn it into a 50, 60, 70-yard touchdown. I think he has a floor of like 10 to 12 points this week if he plays with Lockett being out. But I think his ceiling could be 20, 25 points easily. And again, the Chiefs are obviously going to put their best corner, most of their attention on Metcalf, meaning he's probably not going to have a lot of attention on him. I really like him at this price because of how good he is against the man defense, which obviously that's what the Chiefs run. And then again, they're going to be down and they're going to be throwing. And Geno's good. I mean, Geno's been great all year. I believe he can get those garbage points, and it's going to be good for all 3 of the guys we mentioned, Geno and these 2 receivers.
Yeah, I very much like that play because, like you said, I mean, we love the opportunity that the receivers have in this game. And then you talk about the price point, and that's hard to pass up. So I love that because I honestly hadn't even thought about it because I was just locked in on DK, and I was like, oh, that's fucking.
Well,
good
I thought
point.
Lockett wasn't going to miss any time, but when he had the surgery, apparently he's going to miss at least a week, maybe 2. And I don't even know why he'd be rushing back at this point. But anyway.
No, if they win this game, then you're still very.
Oh, that's true. You're right. They're still alive, but they're not going to win this game. So.
Yeah, they're probably not going to win this game. So if Detroit and Washington were to win and Seattle loses, then yeah, I would not be rushing back at that point. My low tier, 5,200, Darius Slayton of my New York Giants. Slayton has had pretty solid opportunity for the last 5 weeks. He's had at least 6 targets. He's had 5 games this year where he's hit double-digit points. Actually, 6 games. I mean, if you've watched him play, he is the deep guy in this offense. He's the one who makes the big plays when they happen. He does have a propensity to sometimes drop passes. That's really his one issue.
Yeah.
But yeah, outside of the dropping passes part, which is
really
an important part of being a wide receiver, he's been very good. This is a guy that the Giants buried at the start of the year, and now he's playing over the guy who makes $20 million.
Kenny Golladay. What a
straight up, he's better than Kenny Golladay. Granted, everyone is, but the real opportunity here is, besides Darius Slayton being a solid wide receiver this year for the New York Giants, and Richie James does the slot stuff. He's been also very solid. Hodgins has done some red zone stuff. But yeah, if you're looking for the big play guy in this offense, it's Slayton. And I think the Giants are going to have to try to hit some big plays because they're going to be giving up a number of them in this game. So if they want to keep up, they're going to have to take some shots downfield. And again, Who else did I say were in the bottom 3 in yards allowed to number 1 wide receivers? Oh, that's right. It was the Minnesota Vikings to finish it out, 87 yards per game to number 1 wide receivers. Only the aforementioned Detroit Lions give up more total yards to all wide receivers. And if we go over the last 8 weeks, no team is giving up more fantasy points to outside wide receivers of their opponents than the Minnesota Vikings. So, yeah, this is the recipe of Minnesota is going to light up the Giants. Giants have to throw. Like you said earlier, that's been a productive way to stay in games against Minnesota is throwing the ball. I believe outside of the Colts, who are barely not even a functional offense anymore, for the 5 previous games, the Minnesota Vikings had given up 240 or more yards to opposing wide receivers.
It's ridiculous.
So, yeah, this is Darius Slayton. And, yeah, I think you can also – Richie James is an interesting play as well.
What about Isaiah Hodgins? Because I wanted to ask you about it. He's 4,100.
Yeah.
He's had some good four receptions or more, 3 straight games, 7.7 points more, 15 back-to-back weeks.
I think any of these guys is a reasonable guy to throw in to your lineups because, yeah, Hodgins has been scoring. Richie James is the slot guy. He tends to be more of the guy
PPR guy, yeah.
But I think if you're trying to play for like which one of these guys has the highest ceiling, the one who could give me the 23-point game where I'm like, hell yeah, that just won me a ton of money, then it's Slayton. So, yeah, I think, yeah, if you need to save more money to get a play somewhere else, you can absolutely opt for one of those other guys because, yeah, I think at least one Giants wide receiver is going to have a very good game. But if I'm looking for the guy who gives me the chance to win the big money, it's Slayton.
And we didn't go with Barkley, just real quickly, because this is a Giants fan. Do you think that – because he looked really good last week. I was worried about him. He looked more like himself. They've also struggled with running backs catching passes. I mean, Vikings, again, defense is trash. Do you like him overall this week, or was it just maybe a little too expensive when you got like Henry versus Houston? And
yeah, I think, yeah, if you needed to save money, and obviously, yeah, McCaffrey's been insane the last 3 weeks. Henry is in his God mode against Houston. And those guys are all, 700 to 900 more than Barkley. I just think Minnesota as a defense, to your point, yeah, they're not great at covering backs either. But this is a defense that's been much worse against the pass than the run.
Right.
And I do expect the Giants to be trailing for most, if not all, of this game. So, yeah, it was just harder for me to then be like, if I'm going to splurge for a running back,
right,
it's got to be Derrick Henry. So, yeah, I wouldn't say out on Saquon Barkley this week. It's just
no. I was just curious,
because of the game script and the Derrick Henry matchup. I don't know that Saquon will be in any of my lineups. And most weeks I put him in my lineups because I do believe he's that good. And he did look
PPR and everything,
much healthier and better last week. So
he looked really good, which is good for y'all because that was what I was most worried about your playoff.
There's a week coming up where Saquon Barkley will likely be one of my plays.
I know it is. All right, tight ends. I got a tight end that obviously we're going to talk about, but I moved him to flex. I didn't want to have an $8,000 tight end in the tight end slot. So I'm going to go Dallas Goedert for my expensive 4,500 at Dallas. This is all about what he did again in the one game with Minshew last year. I mean, it is something. Goddard is a good tight end. He had his biggest fantasy game ever, 28.5 points, 5 targets, 5 receptions, 105 yards, 2 touchdowns. Cowboys, by the numbers, are 5th versus the tight ends. But, man, do we talk about this all the time, Joe. You got to look at who they played. It's not much. And if you really look at the decent to good tight ends, they beat them up. Higbee, 7 receptions, 52 yards. Hayden Hurst, 5 receptions. Bates and Thomas, whoever the hell that is for Washington. I do know Logan Thomas. They had 9 receptions combined. Brock Wright, who the fuck's that guy for Detroit after Hawkinson got traded? He had 4 for 57 versus Hawkinson, 5 receptions with Minnesota. Your boy Evan Ingram, 8 receptions, 62 yards. Goddard only had 2 receptions in the first matchup, but a reminder that Hurts only threw the ball 25 times for 155 yards, and the Eagles knew they didn't have to do anything because they were playing Cooper Rush. I think Goddard is a great play this week. Minshew obviously showed that he liked throwing to him last time, and I looked it up. He threw to the tight ends a ton in Jacksonville. So Obviously, if a report comes out that Goddard's on a pitch count, but from what I've read, it looks like he's good to go. So I really like Goddard, 4,500 at Dallas. And again, indoors, not worrying about the weather.
Yeah, I like that one as well. Yeah, I guess I did mention that in my my wide receiver stuff that keep in mind the Giants playing indoors in Minnesota is not we're not playing in the cold weather of Minnesota. We're playing in the nice temperature controlled environment. But yeah, I like Dallas Goedert as well. I think I think the more we go, the more I'm talked into the Minshew play is actually the real lesson here is you keep listening AJ Brown, Dallas Goedert. I'm like, yeah, those are good plays. Oh, that means Gardner Minshew.
And the Cowboys D has just not been the same.
Again,
they also
missing a couple of top wideout or top corners, and that opens holes for you everywhere. So I could not avoid the temptation.
That boy,
Travis Kelce, $8,000. I mean, here's the thing: in this Saturday slate, because that's what's happening because of Christmas on Sunday. We got the Saturday,
and it's
slate.
A shitty slate Sunday, by the way. God Almighty.
Yeah, spend time with your families, guys,
for sure.
But there are 5 guys in the Saturday slate who, outside of the quarterbacks, obviously, who average more points on DK than Travis Kelce. They all cost at least $300 more than Travis Kelce, which is, again, what we always say when we talk about playing Kelce. Treat him as a wide receiver because that's what he is. Furthering the dominance on PFF's advantage tight end chart, George Kittle and Pat Freiermuth are at 32% this week, tied for second. Travis Kelce's advantage is rated at 76%, so more than double what they have anyone else. Because, I mean, unsurprisingly, easily their top-graded tight end this year. And Seattle's one of the best matchups you can possibly have for a tight end. They're 31st in fantasy points, whether it's DK or otherwise, to tight ends. Yardage-wise, they are 30th. Touchdowns, they're tied for 28th. Or no, they are 28th on their own. But my favorite part is, again, yardage, only the Cardinals and Titans are giving up more yards. They're 16th in receptions allowed. They allow tight ends 14.8 yards per reception. So if you get the ball to your tight end, he's going places. And
look at the tight ends in the league this year.
Kelce's getting the ball.
Like, for real. How do you do that?
Yeah, the Chargers are the only other defense giving up more than 13 yards per reception to opposing tight ends. So, yeah, Seattle's horrific against tight ends. It's like I said, they're bad at covering
Kelce's the greatest pass-catching tight end of all time. With
terrible against tight ends. Yeah, this is not the team for Seattle to play because the two things they don't do in pass coverage at all is tight ends and running backs. You have Jerick McKinnon and Travis Kelce. So I'm saying if you want to go with Mahomes, potentially just lock both of those guys
double stack.
McKinnon's not too expensive.
I'm going to try to argue that it should
all
be
in on that.
Kelce and Schuster, and I'll get that in a minute. He's my high-end flex, so let me just go ahead and add a little bit of this. Not that there's really much that needs to, but 9 games this year, Seattle has allowed an opposing tight end to score 10 points or more. Think about how happy you are if you don't have Kelce this year, if your tight end gets 10 points. They've allowed it 9 times in 11 games. Opposing tight ends have scored 8.3 points or more. That's basically every team they've played. 7 times an opposing tight end has finished top 9 on DK for the week at tight end. 5 times top 6. Kittle's just had 25.3 points last week. And oh, by the way, Hockenson put up a 40-burger on this team. Kelce at 8,000 is a way better deal than A.J. Brown at 8,100. I like him better than any receiver, including Jefferson this week because of the matchup. At $8,000, he's like, what, $1,000 cheaper? Isn't Jefferson like right at 9K this week?
Yeah.
Yeah. For $1,000 cheaper, he's averaging 21 points per game. He's playing by far the worst defense in the league.
Actually, 9,300. So
there you go, $1,300 cheaper. I mean, it's ridiculous. He's going to have at least 20 points. That's a given. And he could have that game like he did versus what was the Raiders, where he had like 3 touchdowns. I could easily see that this week. Totally co-sign. But he's actually technically my expensive tier flex. My median tier flex, tight end. I can't believe I'm going to do this, but fuck it. I'm going with Chig Okonkwo again. 3,500 versus Houston. Texans are 23rd versus tight ends on DK. The issue why I'm saying I can't believe I'm doing this is not Chig Okonkwo. I think he's great. Malik Willis is starting, which is rough. But I will say Okonkwo, and this was really before he got really involved in the offense, he saw 5 targets in the 2 games that Willis played. That was almost a 20% target share for those 2 games. That's how little they threw. He's coming off 3 straight double-digit games. He's seen 5 or more targets in 4 straight, 30 or more yards in 7 straight, which, again, for tight ends this year, it's really good. 40 or more in 5 of his last 7, including his last 3. And the Texans, just in recent games versus tight ends, Dallas Goedert, 8 for 100 and a touchdown. Your boy Kager for the Giants caught a touchdown, 1 reception, 8 yards, but a touchdown. We'll take that. He's probably $2,000 that week. Logan Thomas, 5 for 65. Dalton Schultz, 6 for 87. Travis Kelce, 10 for 105. And the Titans better run it well, because I'm going to tell you, the Texans have been freaking frisky all of a sudden. I don't know what the hell is going on. They've played 2 incredible games against 2 of the better teams in the league to follow up the game versus Philly. What was that, like a month ago? Where they hung with Philly for 3 quarters. So if for some reason Henry does not go completely bananas, they don't really have much option. I don't believe Willis can get the ball to Burks. So obviously I think a tight end's got a better chance of doing it. Chig Okonkwo, 3,500. I think he is worth a shot in some of these big tournaments.
Yeah, I like that play. He's come through for us. So, hey, if a guy keeps coming through, we'll keep loving on him. I'm going pretty expensive. This is kind of like not even really a mid tier, but I like the play.
Well, when you're expensive, 8,000, technically it is a median tier, right?
That's right. Exactly. TJ Hawkinson, 4,900 against my Giants, because I'm a masochist. But Giants are 19th against tight ends. We're not terrible, but I tend to think that's less because we're actually covering tight ends well than
who you played.
There's usually, that, and there's usually someone else open. Because again, I say this every week. This is why Dalvin Cook, who is not one of our official plays, but if I have an unofficial play this week, it's Dalvin Cook. Okay, I think our inside linebackers are the worst inside linebackers in the NFL.
You've been saying that all year.
Maybe Landon Collins is going to provide some life. He did last week against Washington because, hey, converted safeties would be the best linebacker on our team. And also, Xavier McKinney is out at safety. So if you're throwing a safety on a tight end as well, which I don't think you are in this game because you have Justin Jefferson to deal with. But, yeah, we're down multiple DBs. Our linebackers are terrible. The real choice with this matchup is which Minnesota guys to go with. So that's why I'm basically just picking all of them. Because I think you should consider all of them. Because TJ Hawkinson, if we prorate what he's done since coming over to them in week 9.
That was a great trade for them.
It was. Because, this
pressure
is a team
off of Jefferson.
Where, I obviously, like a lot of people, especially after last week when you go down 33-0 to the Colts, I have some real skepticism about this team as an actual Super Bowl contender.
They're +2, Joe, and they're 11-3
right.
a year.
But at the same time, I don't think there's probably ever going to be a better opportunity in the Kirk Cousins era for them to contend than this season, because they have a real chance to get that 2 seed. And then if someone upsets Philadelphia in round 2, you can play all home games leading to the Super Bowl. And my Giants were we had like a negative point differential, I think, in 2011 when we won the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So
no, for sure.
Weird stuff happens.
Hot at the right time.
So yeah, I'm with you. Just the all-in made sense. Since he's been there through 7 games, if you prorate that out to 17 games, he'd have a 95 reception, 814 yard season. Again, we're full PPR. So, yeah, this guy is putting up elite tight end numbers. The one problem is he's only scored 1 touchdown. He's had 8 red zone targets. And, again, he's had 39 receptions. So, the touchdowns should come at some point. Obviously, the issue is you have like a bunch of different options to score touchdowns in this offense. But yeah, if your vibe is I don't want to spend a bunch of money on Jefferson, I don't want to spend a bunch of money on Cook, throw TJ Hawkins in your lineup because you should have a Minnesota Viking.
Would you double stack? Like, if you're going to do
lineup.
that, would you put like Hawkinson with either Osborne or Thielen and just hope that it's that game where it's weird and, you know, they end up scoring the touchdowns and not Jefferson Cook?
I'm totally good with that because, again, our Darnay Holmes is awful in the slot. I mean, he's the guy who's committing pass interference.
And Osborne's the one that's in the slot most time, or does Jefferson
and Osborne's
still
in the
run
slot. Osborne, I believe, is the primary slot guy, although obviously Jefferson will go in there sometimes. Fabian Moreau will probably be on Jefferson the whole game because that's what we've been doing since Dory Jackson's been out, but none of it matters because none of the guys besides Dory Jackson are good. So, yeah, you can do whatever you want. We're about to start talking about the flexes in a minute. I almost just said the entire Minnesota receivers as my flexes.
It would have been a flex of your own there, Joe, to do that.
It's hopefully I'm just jinxing the Vikings. The Giants are going to win this game and shut them out. But
I respect the game if that's what you're doing. I really do. Bargain tier tight end, and again, like probably Kelsey's going to be in every one of my lineups. I know I'm technically listed as a flex. I just wanted to give you guys some other options, and we're really scraping the barrel. But Miko Pruitt, 2,500 at Baltimore, 7.7 points or more, 2 of his last 3. Finished top 13 at the position in 2 of the last 3 games. Saw 3 targets in the first game with Ritter and ran a season-high 13 routes, which that's obviously important. Played 50% or more snaps and 4 straight since the Pitts injury. And the Ravens have allowed 3 or more receptions to tight ends in 3 straight. So this is one of those, what did Joe Pappy say? He's just hoping for one of these big galoos to fall into the end zone. Hello, Miko Pruitt. That's exactly what I'm hoping for at 2,500 versus Baltimore. And I also think even with Lamar out, I'm worried the Falcons are going to get smoked. Ritter did not look great last week. The Ravens defense is pretty good, and they are going to send the house at Ritter, which is what New Orleans did. Even more likely that means Pruitt might get a few extra targets because tight ends usually aren't too far from the line of scrimmage. So Miko Pruitt, 2,500 is my bargain tight end.
Yeah, I like that play. I mean, we've had decent success over our time with the crazy cheap tight ends. I mean, who was it? Was it Trey McBride the first year you and I did this?
It was, the guy that played for Philly, and now I'm forgetting his name. I'll look it up. You go over your bargain. I'll get his name.
Yeah, you had some guy where I was like, all right, Keith. Sure,
you literally were like, Keith, what are you talking about?
Scored a touchdown. Yeah, and then they scored. You picked the same guy twice. He
had 2 touchdowns the first game too.
Yeah, I was like, all right, well, I'm never going to question you on the seemingly random tight ends anymore. I'm going Daniel Bellinger of my New York Giants against Minnesota. I think similar to what I just said about going against the Giants, Minnesota hasn't been terrible against tight ends. They've been thoroughly mediocre. So this is really Bellinger is cheap. I believe he's 3,300. And opportunity is there. He played 98% of the snaps last week against Washington. He's had a couple of 90+% games. He's coming back from that eye injury, so I think he's going to get more involved in the offense as we go here. He had 8 receptions the first 2 weeks. Last week, he only had 1 reception. There wasn't a lot of passing going on for the Giants offense in that game. But again, I think the Giants have to open it up. They're going to have to fling it more in this game. And, this offensive coaching staff has shown the ability to scheme stuff up, including for Bellinger. He has 2 touchdowns this season. Both of them were plays clearly designed to get him the ball in the red zone. So I think especially if the Giants can get some success with Saquon in the run game, then that's when, you get the rollout with Daniel Jones rolling out, and either he's running to wide open space or Daniel Bellinger's there in the flat and he's taking that wide open space. So yeah, I just think the Giants have to fling it. I think, similar to Minnesota, except that all the Giants outside of Saquon are cheap. You just kind of pick the one that feels right to you. whether that's Slayton, whether that's Richie James, whether that's Bellinger. These guys are very cheap. And yeah, I do think the Giants, again, I think that we're going to lose because I think they're scoring 30 whatever points.
And you really are trying to EC this shit between picking every Viking there is. Now you're saying, I really do think we're going to lose.
If the Giants cover this game, I think we're 4-point dogs. And I don't think it's out of the question we cover it. It's going to be because the offense is scoring like 24 points. And so if there's 3 touchdowns to go around, then at least one, if not multiple, of these cheap Giants is going to hit. And I think Bellinger, again, because I think they like to scheme stuff up for the tight ends. They were even doing it with like the practice squad guys who I couldn't even name now or at the time they scored for us. They had those guys getting schemed up in the red zone. So I think there's a real opportunity for a guy who dominates the snaps when he's healthy to do something here.
First of all, you're going to score 20-plus points. Vikings defense is trash. It's the same thing I was telling you about the Packers defense early in the season. Second of all, I can't believe I forgot this. It was Trey Burton. That's who it was.
Trey Burton. That's who it was. Yes, Trey Burton.
All right, the flex. I already told you who my expensive tier is. It's Travis Kelce for a litany of reasons. Who's your expensive tier, Joe?
All right, so my expensive tier is the most expensive guy, and is Justin Jefferson at 9,300. And I'm not going to actually tell you anything about Justin Jefferson in my justification because A, he's Justin Jefferson. You should know he's awesome. That's why he's 9,300. But what I want to talk about instead is what happens when a wide receiver of Justin Jefferson's caliber goes up against a Wink Martindale defense. Wink Martindale, who blitzes more than any other defensive coordinator. It's like 4 straight seasons from the Ravens to now. Every single season, he blitzes more than anyone else. What happens when a receiver like Justin Jefferson goes up against a defense like that when the DBs are banged up? Because, again, Xavier McKinney, top safety, out. Adoree Jackson, top corner, out. Jamar Chase last year against the Baltimore Ravens.
Ooh, I remember
8 receptions, 201 yards, and a touchdown, 7 receptions, 125 yards. The floor is the 125 yards, 7 reception game. He is going to get you 20 points in this game. Now, obviously, 9,320 points, that's not the biggest win. But if he gets you the 8 reception, 200-yard game with a touchdown or maybe multiple scores, because somehow Chase only scored 1 touchdown in those 2 games, well, then, yeah, now we're talking. So, yeah, I just think this is like the Derrick Henry matchup versus Houston. Similar vibes. I just don't see a way that Justin Jefferson doesn't go completely off in this game.
Unless they go
so
like
obviously
Nancy
you can only
Kerrigan,
pick one of them.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So obviously it's going to be hard to build up a lineup that includes Henry and Justin Jefferson. Although, shoot.
Challenge accepted, Joe. I'm
going to do one. Yeah. Like let's throw
in. With Minshew, I think it's possible.
All these guys. That's true. Yeah, we just throw Minshew in. Heck yeah, I'm in. Throw both of them in, get a minimum 50 points, potentially 90 points, honest to God, from those 2 players, and then just build around from that. So, yeah, Justin Jefferson, because he will go off this week, guaranteed.
All right, my median tier is Juju Smith-Schuster, 5,800 versus Seattle. I know people are going to say, wait a minute, Seattle's good versus receivers. I'm going to try to debunk that here in a minute. But first of all, with Schuster, the last 5 games that he's ran at least 20 routes, because we talked about this a couple of weeks ago when he was my play, actually last week, that he had the injury, right? He missed a couple of games. He didn't play, like he played, but he didn't play a lot of snaps. But in the games that he's ran at least 20 routes, his last 5, he's averaging 9 targets per. He saw 7 red zone targets in those 5 games. He's averaging 8 receptions over those 5. 9 or more in his last 3, and is averaging 21.14 fantasy points on DK. He finished top 8 at the position in those 5 games 4 or 5 times, and the one time he didn't, he finished 18th. And he's still below 6K, which is so freaking disrespectful. I think you could argue he should be in the same price range as CeeDee Lamb and St. Brown, because their numbers are very similar if you take away those 3 games when he was hurt. This is why I say that Seattle, they're ranked 3rd versus receivers, but I haven't seen anybody make this case. When they played Detroit, no Amon-Ra St. Brown. When they played the Rams, no Cooper Kupp. When they played the Cardinals game 1, no DeAndre Hopkins. When they played the Chargers, no Josh Palmer, and Keenan Allen got knocked out in the first half. When they played the 49ers, no Deebo Samuel. And then some of the QBs that they played. Right. John Wolford, Sam Darnold, Andy Dalton, Marcus Mariota, Russell Wilson, Daniel Jones. I don't think this D is that good. And I think that Schuster at 5,800 is going to do what he's been doing the last 5 games that he runs at least 20 routes. He's going to have 7 to 10 receptions, somewhere in that 70 to 100-yard range. If he scores a touchdown, he's going to have that big fire symbol next to him. Because I just think he's so automatic right now. He's became the guy behind Kelsey. Every game, it's 7 to 10 receptions. And obviously, I'm assuming Seattle, with how bad they are at tight ends, they're probably losing sleep thinking, how are we going to stop Travis Kelce? I wouldn't be surprised if it's Schuster that ends up having a monster game. But what I love about him is I think he has one of the highest floors there is, particularly at this price. It's crazy that he's still 5,800. That's less than he was 5 weeks ago. He's had 3 20-point games since then. I love Schuster this week versus Seattle at 5,800.
I mean, that was an extremely compelling case for Seattle not being good against wide receivers.
I was shocked. I started looking at it, and I'm like, damn, they hadn't played. Like, they've gotten lucky every week somebody's missed.
Yeah, so I love that, which just, again, makes me feel even better about Mahomes.
Right.
And
could make you feel better about all those guys, too, because they're down and they got to chunk it.
Right, exactly. With my all-in game, I feel even better about it. I guess I have 2 all-in games because I'm all in on the Vikings, Giants, too. But I feel great about that one, even more so now. My mid-tier is Devonta Smith, 6,600 against Dallas. He has 6 straight games now with at least 8 targets. Granted, obviously a lot of that was with Hurts, but he does have some experience with Minshew. He's been around, obviously, last season. But the last 3 games especially, he has been going off, averaging nearly 21 points per game, at least 17 in all 3 games, at least 5 receptions, at least 60 yards. He's had a couple scores. He's really coming through lately. And then again, Dallas, incredibly banged up in that secondary. And in the first game these teams played, Trevon Diggs, who was the one corner who is still healthy, still very good, actually better than he was last season if you're talking about trying to limit opposing wide receivers.
Yeah, he doesn't give up the big plays as
passes. Yeah. For most, at least I think most of the first half is what I read, he shadowed A.J. Brown. So I don't know. Now, apparently in the second half, they went back to just lining up on different sides. Whoever came there, that's who they covered. But if he does shadow A.J. Brown, or even a little bit, that's huge opportunity for Devonta because, again, down their second and third corners. So assuming he will primarily be on the outside, that means he's either seeing Trayvon Mullen, Trayvon Mullen. I'm trying to remember who I was looking at before. Kelvin Joseph. Yeah, it's probably going to be Kelvin Joseph on the outside. He has a 44 coverage grade right now. It's going to be bad. It's going to be bad if he gets lined up against anyone who's not Diggs, and that's going to happen because Diggs can only be on with him or A.J. Brown.
He can't guard them all.
So yeah, at least one of these receivers is going to eat in this game. And as we've seen, especially over these last 3 games, I know one game I said one of those guys will go off and then they both had 100 yards. And then like that's what's going on with this Eagles offense. And like you and I have said, we don't, it's not as good without Hurts, but Gardner Minshew is a guy who's gotten it done in the past. Again, 17 points per game in fantasy over his career as a starter. So, yeah, I think Devonta
This will be
Smith
by far the best offensive line he's had blocking for him, which I think is really important.
Yes, and the best skill guys he's had.
By the way, we were talking about Henry and Jefferson, how we get him in there. You could stack Minshew, Smith, Goddard, 15,900.
Minshew, Smith, Goddard. All right.
And that's how you get Jefferson Henry in there.
I'm feeling it.
All right. Bargain tier. Give me Drake London. He is what is he? 4,800. Sorry, let me get back to my notes here. Yeah, he's 4,800 at Baltimore. I really thought he was going to be more expensive. He basically stayed the same price. He's coming off a game where he saw 11 targets, caught 7 passes, 70 yards. We won't talk about the fucking fumble at the end of the game. He's seen 23 targets his last 2 games. The issue is, and this is why I keep telling people he's going to keep getting peppered, the Falcons' other 3 receivers are 5'9", 5'8", and 5'9". What I like about them this week, number 1 receivers versus Baltimore, 4 receptions or more in 4 straight games. But this is what I really love. They struggle with big, wide receivers. Drake London, 6'4". How bad do they struggle? Let's just go over it. There's a litany of them. Corey Davis, 6'3", 6 receptions, 77 yards. Devontae Parker, 6'3", 5 receptions, 156 yards. Donovan Peoples-Jones, 6'2". He had 6 receptions for 71 yards in the first game, 3 receptions for 31 yards and a touchdown in the second one. Mike Evans, he's 6'5". He had 6 receptions, 123 yards. Julio Jones, he's 6'3". He had 3 catches for 21 yards and a touchdown. Zay Jones, 6'2", 11 receptions, 145 yards. Marvin Jones, 6'2", 3 receptions, 31 yards and a touchdown. George Pickens, 6'3", 3 receptions, 78 yards. And again, Drake London saw 11 of the 26 passes from Ridder last week. That is probably going to be his target volume for the rest of the year. I'm shocked he's 4,800. I know Ridder didn't look good. I think he's going to look better this week. I know it's another bad matchup. Ravens are going to blitz like crazy. I'm going to get into why they're my defense this week, one of them. But just on volume alone at 4,800, and also with the talent that he has, he's going to be in a lot of lineups for me.
Oh, I am 100% with you on this one. If you hadn't had him, he would be my guy here. I actually do like him a little bit more than my low tier guy, in part because of price, and in part because you know he's going to see the ball.
Right.
It's just a question of how accurate that pass will be. As
hopefully better than last week.
Hopefully better than last week.
It was rough.
It's got to be better than last week.
It was a bad place to start. I'll give them the benefit of that. It's New Orleans. They're blitzing. That's a loud place. And again, the other problem is the 3 other wide receivers are 5'9" or shorter. That's not good. God, I miscount this.
Definitely. As much as he often teased us, we do miss him.
I did.
But the guy I did go with is Adam Thielen. 5,300 against my Giants. Thielen, much like Devonta Smith, really productive over the last month. 3 double-digit games in his last 4. He's averaged 7 targets and 14.6 points on DK over the last 4. 3 touchdowns. I mean, yeah, it's simple. The Giants love to play cover 0. They love to put everybody in man. If you get Adam Thielen in the red zone, he is still an extremely effective guy at getting open. And if we don't go cover 0, the coverage is, the safeties are shading over to wherever Justin Jefferson is. That's just the way it has to be. So, I mean, that's where the openings come for whether it's Thielen, whether it's Hawkinson. Again, it could be Osborne because
they're going to make a run. They got to get him more involved. He's a stud, man. Like, he's been one of the best receivers in football the last 3-4 years.
And over the last 8 weeks, Giants 3rd most points allowed to wide receivers in the perimeter.
Uh-oh.
So as bad as we are against the run, because we are awful, we are also over the last 2 months, we've been that bad against outside wide receivers. So yeah, like I said, take your pick, take multiple guys, like do what you want. The Vikings will score points in this game.
I'm sorry. If you see me making some faces and stuff, I have the Jets-Jags game going. The quarterback right now is a guy I've never heard of that played for North Dakota, Streveler.
That's not.
They were running the option. Zach Wilson probably got booed out of the building. I have it muted. But that's what some of the face were. Garrett Wilson just pulled a Drake London where he caught a pass and then just threw it up in the air. All right, moving on to the defenses, and then we'll get out of here.
Jags winning the AFC South. Lock it in.
I love it. I called that, remember, preseason.
You did. It took me 2 weeks to believe.
And then the Giants. So we got, potentially
you
2
did,
good
yeah.
there. I did say Giants playoffs.
As is often the case, I need to pay more attention to what you say.
That's right. Well, we'll pay a little attention here. My defenses, expensive tier. Baltimore Ravens, 3,200 versus Atlanta. I didn't realize how good the Ravens have been fantasy-wise. They've allowed 14 points or less in 5 of their last 6. That's points allowed. Multiple sacks in 10 straight games. 4 or more in half of them. 4 or more sacks in 5 of their last 10 games. Ravens have scored 5 points or more in every game this season. Double digits in 4 of their last 8. Facing a rookie QB, making his second start, freezing temperatures. Yikes. Median. Give me them Texans. I'm going cheap for both of these, by the way. 2,500 at Tennessee. Texans have scored 5 or more in 4 straight, 7 or more in 3 or 4. Had 3 sacks and caused 2 turnovers in the first game versus the Titans, and that was with Tannehill. Malik Willis is starting. This is the real thing. Again, 187 yards combined passing and rushing from him in his first 2 starts. Obviously, Derrick Henry could go nuts, but if he doesn't. And then the bargain one, this makes no sense to me. The Eagles are 2,200 at Dallas. The Eagles, since the week 7 bye, Joe, 38 fucking sacks. Unbelievable. At least 3 in each game.
Good.
6 or more in half of those 8 games. 6 or more sacks in 4 of the last 8. In the same span, they had 11 takeaways. And I get this is one of the best offensive lines in football. The Eagles had 0 sacks in the first game. They did cause 3 turnovers, though, and I know that was Cooper Rush. The Cowboys allowed 3 sacks last week to the Jags. They turned it over twice. But mainly this pick is about getting a defense that averages 9 points a game for nothing. 2,200. And this is the Cowboys. And this is what I said earlier. I teased earlier. Look, I'm not trying to be mean. I don't know if I said this on the podcast. I know I've said this to friends. The Cowboys since the late 90s are basically the Atlanta fucking Falcons without the success in the playoffs. That's what they are. They're a disaster waiting to happen. They screw things up. They proved it last week again. Like, I get sick of people picking on us. Like, yeah, y'all won Super Bowls 30 years ago. Win something now. I think that it just would be so on brand for the Cowboys to not just get beat, but to get dominated in this game by the Eagles with a backup quarterback in their house in the marquee game at 4 o'clock. I'm telling you, I don't think there's a better defense you can get than the Eagles at 2,200 versus Dallas, especially when Dak all of a sudden is just a turnover machine, which is not what he normally is. I love the Eagles at 2,200. So I got the Ravens 3,200, Texans 2,500, and then the Eagles 2,200 for my defenses.
All right, I like it. I do not have anything to combat you with on that Ravens play. So I guess I lied earlier. I do have 1 pick going against
the Falcons. I can't blame you for that, though. Jesus.
Because, I mean, look, are there better matchups? Sure. I'd say there's 1 or 2, but they're what? The like 9th most expensive defense? I
don't know if there's 1 or 2 better matchups.
There might not be. I like the Bills just because I think as good as Fields is, he's prone to some turnovers, and that game's going to be weird. But I think the Niners are a buzzsaw right now. But the Ravens, yeah, the idea that the Ravens cost 100 more than the Giants when I've just spent an hour talking about how the Giants are going to give up 30-plus points.
And all we have is Drake London. That's it. And Tyler Algier. That's it.
Yeah. So, yeah, and this defense is playing well right now. They haven't had a shit the bed game on DK the entire
That's what I was saying. They 5 points or more. That's crazy to go a whole season.
That's so rare. So 100%, they're going in a bunch of my lineups.
And they're going to blitz the shit out of Ritter, too, after watching the Saints last week.
For my mid-tier, I'm going with the New Orleans Saints.
I like this play.
Against Cleveland, 2,800, which is it's simple. Again, the weather sounds awful. Deshaun Watson has played awful. I also like having a rooting interest. Yeah, I love having a rooting interest against Deshaun Watson. This defense, not up to the quality that we've actually come to expect the last few years, but I mean, 5 straight games they've given up 20 points or less. They shut out the Raiders, who are for all the flaws the Raiders have. It's been a better offense than the Browns' offense with Deshaun Watson so far.
Yep, for sure.
So, and yeah, this is also a team that outside of one Baltimore game, good against the run. 6 of the last 7 games, at least 5 points, which at 2,800 will take. And then lower tier, I do like your Eagles pick. I think that makes a lot of sense. But I'm going to go with the Carolina Panthers against the Detroit Lions, which it's simple. I just don't.
Jared Goff's like, come at me, Joe Matz. Come on, bro. Keep doubting me.
I don't fully buy Jared Goff outdoors. I think it's a little bit iffy.
Didn't we just say this last week?
We did. And I mean, what happened? They scored 20 points against the Jets.
He was good though. He was good.
Yeah, he was 23 of 38. He had a touchdown. It was all right.
Yeah, but he had the comeback drive late.
Right. I mean, well, he came through to win the game, but I don't think fantasy-wise you were like,
no, I get it.
Oh man, look out!
I'm just proud of Goff, man, because I shit on him
the
for
season.
A long time.
They played 6 road games. He has 3 touchdowns and 4 picks on the road.
Ooh,
in 6 games. And Carolina had a surprisingly off game against Pittsburgh defensively because they came in riding 4 straight games with at least 3 sacks, and they only had 1 sack in that game. So that was their first bad game in a month. But hey, they played well they scored 7 points against Seattle at Seattle. And now you've got Detroit, who's not the same team outdoors in a bad weather week for basically everybody. So, 2,300, I'll roll the dice on them.
I like that.
They're also playing to take the lead in their division because everyone in your division is playing for that. So that's another reason to like New Orleans and Carolina is these guys are going all out. They're trying to make the playoffs. Which
is stupid, by the way. I was talking to my buddy who's a Saints fan. He goes, I don't know what the fuck we're doing. I'm like, I don't either, bro. I'm like, why are y'all trying to win?
Hey,
at least we drafted a quarterback last year.
One of you gets to upset the Cowboys when they call a QB sneak with 14
it's
seconds
not going to be us.
Timeouts.
No, sir. We're losing.
No, I was going to say it's probably Tampa or bust. It's Tampa or bust, I think, if we want the upset. But although if Carolina made the playoffs and then upset Dallas, that'd be
New Orleans, Seattle all over again
this season,
right? From 2008
I think it'd be worse. I think it would be worse.
That was a good New Orleans team, though, too.
It was, but I think if this Dallas team, who is looking at the field right now and being like, only the Eagles and Niners are on our level,
Joe,
they lost to a team that fired their coach.
What did I just say, Joe?
Woo.
And it's true. Go back and look. They didn't won a playoff game, or they won 1 playoff game, right? They won 1 game now?
It's 2, I believe, over the last since they won the last Super Bowl they won. They've won 2 playoff games.
Yeah, Falcons have been to 3 conference championships. So again, they're the Falcons without the success in the playoffs.
There you go.
Just saying. Well, this has been fun. We appreciate everybody. We want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas. We're really excited about the rest of the way because we've got. I'm serious. We got the playoffs coming on. We got Bob Harris next week. Okay. That's awesome. We
also get a very full slate of Sunday games next week, which will be nice after the last 2 weeks where it's like, hey, the bye's over. It's going to be awesome. And it's like, oh, a bunch of the good games are not on the main slate.
Luckily, the Packers-Dolphins game is first, so we can watch that. There'll be the one decent game. And then literally you got Brady versus McSorley. It's the worst. It's the worst slate I've ever seen. But we really do. We want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas. I want to real quickly remind everyone, fantasyandframes.com. Waiver wire article is up. The Chasing Upside article, I believe, is up now. If not, it's going to be up by the morning. Tomorrow night, we're going to be live doing the pregame show for Saturday. I think Joe Matz may finally make an appearance. Just, we appreciate everybody's support. We really do feel bad about last week. That was the mulligan. We're coming back strong this week.
That's right.
We're dedicated. We're serious. But we really do appreciate all the support. And for Keith Fleming, Joe the Brain Matz, this has been the Daily Fix Week 16 preview.